Ansible's ad hoc mode is great for doing individual tasks, but most people use Ansible Playbooks, which allows you to do more things like you can use variables, you can use conditional statements, and you can do more than one thing at a time. So we're going to look at the format and function of what an Ansible Playbook looks like. Now the language that it uses is called YAML, which stands for Yet Another Markup Language, which I just love the name of it. But it's a really simple language to understand because it's not really designed for programming. It's designed for ease of understanding what's happening. So we're going to use that. Now, all we're going to do today is group some tasks together to make a playbook. And why that's important is because we have this guy here. If you have to do a bunch of different things, like you need to install Apache and update a Yum repo and deploy an app update and update the website, configure a reverse proxy, all of those things that you need to do, if you're using ad hoc commands, you have to go one by one and do them each individually and craft that statement. But using my awesome special effects here, boom, we can use playbooks, which will allow us to do everything here. This is me with my Detroit Tigers hat, by the way. What a playbook will do is allow you to group tasks together. So with a single command, you can execute all of these statements on multiple computers, etc. So playbooks are what most people use. I don't want you to think, though, that using ad hoc mode is wrong or not effective. It's a wonderful thing to do. It's just more often than not, we have a lot of things to do, and so playbooks are the way to do that. Now, YAML is a really easy language to start doing, so we're just going to create a playbook from scratch. Now, as with almost all of my courses, I'm going to use VI as my editor, but you can use whatever editor you want, even a GUI editor if that's your thing. And we're going to create a file called, we'll just call it test.yaml. So the .yaml at the end is just the way to signify that it's a YAML file. And inside here, our first line has to have 3 dashes. And you notice it changed color there because that is kind of the way to signify that this is a YAML file that we're dealing with. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is put a dash and then say hosts and what hosts we want to do. Now this is going to look familiar because it's the same concept as an ad hoc command. We're just making a configuration file and we're going to be able to do multiple things in it. So hosts, let's actually say we're going to use the GUI host. Remember, that is a group of computers that happens to be these two, our Ubuntu and our CentOS machine. So we're going to say those are the hosts that we're going to use. We'll do a space. Now, the thing about YAML to understand is that spacing or white space is very important. In fact, you have to be able to use spaces to show different sections of a file. So the spaces are important. You can't just put white space or delete white space and have it all work. You need to have that white space, kind of like with Python where white space is important. Same thing in YAML. It's important to do that. And notice this section, this host section, started with this dash, a single dash and then a space. Well, we're still in this host section. So I'm going to say without a dash, tasks, colon, and then I'm going to press enter. And now I'm going to space into here and I'm going to start another dash. And what's going on here is when there is a group of things, you have to put a dash before it. So the tasks and a colon is going to have more than one line of information. So in order to break that apart, we do another dash section. You'll get the hang of it as we start making them, but some lines are going to have dashes and some are not because this is still part of the hosts section, including the tasks, and this task is now broken up into multiple parts. So it'll make sense as we go along, but don't be too confused if the dashes or no dashes are confusing at first. So we're going to say name. We're going to name this task. Now this is different. Inside ad hoc mode of Ansible, we don't set a name for a task because we're only doing one task at a time. But here we need to specify. So I'm going to say do a uname. All right, that's going to be the name of it. It can be any arbitrary name. Spaces are okay. And press enter. I'm going to space out to that spot. Now I'm still in the same task, so I'm not going to put another dash here, but I am going to say what module I want to use. Now I'm going to use the shell module. So shell colon, and then what command or what action do we want the module to do? Well, in this case, I'm going to say uname minus a, and then I'm going to redirect that, which is why I'm using the shell module and not the command module. So I'm going to redirect that into a file home nugget1 desktop results.txt. Now I'm just doing that so we can see the results because they don't actually display by default on here. When we actually run the command, we won't see the results of the uname, so I want to redirect it into the results into a file so we can look at it to make sure it worked. All right, so that's the first thing we're going to do, and now I want to do another task. So I'm going to come over here. Now you can have a blank line for readability, that's okay. This one is going to say, who am I? And I'm just naming it. Again, this is not a command. This is just the name of this particular task. Use spaces. It's important not to do a tab for spacing. You have to actually use the space bar or use space characters. All right, and I'm going to use the shell module again. And the command I'm going to do here is, who am I? And I'm going to redirect and append onto the file, home nugget1 desktop results.txt. And that's it. That's all I'm going to do for right now. Let's see if we can figure out what it's going to do. Now, there's actually two different tasks in here. We could do this with two separate ad hoc commands, but if we do it this way, we're going to say, okay, all the hosts in the GUI group, it's going to type uname, or it's going to execute uname and redirect it into this file for the results. And same thing down here, it's going to say, who am I? And it's going to redirect it into the results. So let's save this file. And then if we type ls, we'll see it's just right here. It's the file we just made. To execute an Ansible playbook, you use the Ansible-playbook command, and then just the name of it. So test.yaml. Press enter. We're going to see a couple different things happening. So it's going to say, all right, it's going to do the GUI group. Gathering facts we're going to talk about in a later nugget. That's where we can learn information about the particular host and get variables. It's really, really awesome stuff. But nonetheless, it gathers the facts even though we're not using them right now. And then the first task is named do a uname. Remember, that's what we called it. And it did it on here and here. This task, who am I? It did on here and here. The play recap, it says it's okay. There were changes made, but notice there's no output. So if we go back over, or not back over, if we go over to here, and we can see, oh look, it made a file on the desktop. And if we double click on it, we can see this file. And this was the results of the uname-a, and then the who am I? Well, nugget1. You're probably thinking, but why didn't it do it as root, right? Why didn't it sudo as root? Well, we didn't tell it to. We actually just told it to execute as the user that we are. By default, that's what it does. So we'll get rid of that. If we come over here and CentOS, we can see it's here as well. Though it doesn't show on the desktop, you can see it is in the desktop file. And same thing here. If we double click on this, we can see the text file that it did the uname-a, and then the second line says nugget1. All right, let's go back over here and run this as root. Now there's two different ways we can run this as root. We could, just like with the Ansible command, if we press the up arrow, we could come back here and say Ansible playbook -b for become, and then it will do this as root. So you can do it that way if you want. There's nothing wrong with that. However, if we're trying to put everything in our configuration file, why don't we actually add a line in here? So down here under hosts, if we add a line, remember space over so they're all lined up, we can say become : yes or true. Either one will work. You can say become : yes or become : true. Either one is going to work. And now it's going to become the root user, even if we don't specify it when we execute the command. So we can test that out by running the command again. Ansible playbook test.yaml. Press enter. It's going to do the same things. It's gathering facts, and it made some changes, and it did some things. No output, so we have to go back over and look to see what the output was. And let's look in here now. If we double click on it, here we can see the same thing, uname-a. However, this time, root is the user that was returned when it said, who am I? So we're able to specify what user inside the YAML file or on the command line using -b. And same thing if we come over here. Can see the results have changed now, and sure enough, root is the user on CentOS as well. All right, one more thing I do want to show you is that you can do, here, let's clear the screen. We can say Ansible playbook. If we do a -v for verbose and press enter, we're going to get some more information on the command line. All right, and it's not terribly easy to see. That's why I wanted to show you, in the actual the results file. It shows you what's happening. And in fact, instead of redirecting, let's actually just have it say uname -a, even though we wouldn't normally see any results. Get rid of this, redirect, and run the command again. Now if we look, we should see the results right in line here. So it says do a uname, and we can see, again, this is kind of difficult to parse out, but if you look closely, okay, the standard output lines are, and then it shows you what the output of that is, and sure enough, there it is. All right, so it did that uname, and down here, this is that was on Ubuntu. CentOS did the same thing, the standard SD out, or standard SD out lines, and it shows you those results. Same thing down here. The standard output was root, and it shows us, although it is kind of difficult to read. That's why don't rely on the -v verbose thing for troubleshooting everything that's going on. Because it's not the easiest way to see what's going on. But in a pinch, if you can't figure out why it's not working, if you do the -v flag, it will show you all the results down here, including, but it'll still do what it's supposed to do behind the scene. Anyway, that is how you can put tasks in a playbook and execute a playbook right on the command line instead of doing multiple ad hoc commands. So Cheesy Grin Sean here has showed us how we can go about making that happen. And the important thing to understand is that we're able to do multiple tasks as long as we use the YAML programming language, or the LAML markup language, for creating those files. And you do get the hang of it as you're going along, how to indent and when to put dashes and when not to put dashes. There's lots more we can do with Ansible Playbooks, but for now, I just want you to play with some tasks, put multiple ones on there, and see what you can make them do. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.